Sorry, you be doing music too, right?
Yes, I do. I haven't
Yeah,
done it in a while because I've been concentrating on this. But but yeah, I do music as well.
yeah. We need some positive soundtracks, my brother.
Indeed.
So how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, man. How are you brothers doing?
Are
We're
we
doing
doing good?
fine.
We doing 5 minutes. An honor to have you on here, brother.
It's a real good honor.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you
You
for
you
having me.
you are one of we're a little older than you. You know,
Uh,
I
you
don't
are
know.
one of
What year was he
go ahead
born?
and ask them, Daniel.
What year were you
I'm
born?
40. I just turned 44 in
Oh
July.
yeah, we older than you. Yeah, we older than
I
you,
just
brother.
said that. I
We are
just said
elder.
that,
I wasn't
Daniel.
sure.
I mean, you can look at them and tell, man. Listen, you one of the upcoming brilliant minds of our time that we need for this upcoming generation, brother.
I appreciate you. I'm just doing what I can, and with the inspiration that the ones who came before me
Right,
uh, have given,
right.
and the charge that our ancestors have given, their unborn uh, great grandchildren in terms of the struggle for the freedom of African people. And
Uh,
so,
it's brilliant. It's brilliant, man. You're well respected in the community. You are very well versed writer. You see, we got it up. We got it up, baby. Look
I
at that.
see it. I see it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. That's how we publish today. Is this right here? Race and identity. You know. So tell us, brother, how did you come about at your beginning? Like what drove you in that lane? Were you a Christian at first? Were you because I was. My father
Yes.
was a bishop and all of that stuff. Daniel was a Christian
Christian and a
and
Muslim.
a
And was a
Muslim.
Muslim.
Right.
I was in the nation too at one time. And
Yeah.
Orthodox Sunni Muslim. I know both sides. The
So
fence.
so we didn't start off with the contest. Like we had to really kind of go through we have to go through the whole thing of learning and understanding that what we were being taught just didn't make sense to us when we were shorties coming
Yes.
up. So where'd you start, man, brother? Where'd you
Uh,
you know what I mean?
well, to keep it simple, I would say it's more so just growing up in the South.
Okay.
If I live in Philadelphia now, as an adult, but I grew up for the most part between Louisiana and Texas,
Okay.
and it is very like the racism is very kind of in your face, or at least it was when I was growing up in the 80s, right?
Mhm.
And the I lived and existed in primarily European dominated areas. So of
Yeah,
course
that's
I
what's
went to
on mute, man.
European
That's on mute. You
dominated
can't hear me.
schools,
Right.
Huh?
and
Hold on. Daniel, you gotta mute yourself. Go ahead. I'm sorry,
all
brother.
right, no problem. Um, yeah, so I grew up, in these essentially white spaces,
Correct.
and so when you are one of a few black people
Hmm.
in in those kinds of spaces, you're always constantly wondering, especially growing up in a household where it was not any, little if any, kind of African black consciousness.
Okay.
And so, both my parents were Christians. My dad was a musician and he played in the band. And, he grew up Catholic because, he grew up in New Orleans.
Okay.
And but he was born in Opelousas, but he grew up in New Orleans. And so, the blacks in that area are pretty much uh, Catholics. That's what kind of dominated there. But by the time I came of age, he had left Catholicism, but entered into the quote unquote non-denominational space. So that's kind of more so the kind of a Christian arena. that I grew up in. And so uh, it was this lack of representation, this lack of, books in the house and things that kind of, in just my experiences with European people
Mhm.
in these areas, which fueled my love and hunger for knowledge about Black people. And so, I did as a teenager, I did a stint of, the Hebrew Israelitism. So,
Okay. Hey,
back then
yeah.
I was part of back then it was called the Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge in the 90s. But now they're known as the ISUPK, and it's like a whole bunch of branches. It wasn't that many branches or offshoots, I should say,
Mhm.
of the quote unquote Black Hebrew Israelites. But, going into college and, taking Black history courses and things of that nature, that really kind of formulated, my study habits and started building my library of information, on Black people in African history as I was, waning my way out of the Hebrew Israelite tradition. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of really, the origin story. I need to kind of write that in a more dynamic comic book way, because everybody has
Right.
their origin story, right, in the comic books. But that's pretty much it for me in a nutshell.
So what college did you go to?
I went to two undergrad. So there was back then it was called Texas State University.
Okay.
But now if you look it up, I'm sorry. When I went there, it was Southwest Texas State University. Now when
Southwest
you look
Texas.
it up, it's just going to say Texas State University
Okay.
and then the University of Houston.
Okay.
And so, and what's interesting is when I went to Southwest, there was no Black Studies programs
Really?
or African Studies programs that you can, go under and take any courses. There was no departments, none of that. So if you wanted to learn anything about Black history, you was pretty much on your own. And so, what a year or so before I got there, the the members of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated got kicked off of campus for hazing, right?
Okay.
But they wanted to keep the programming that they were doing going. So when you're kicked off of campus, you can't have programs under your organizational name, right?
Okay.
So what the individual brothers did is they created different organizations. So one of them was called Kumasi, and Kumasi, you know, would meet up on Wednesdays,
Hmm.
and the people who would come, they would just assign books, and everybody would read and come the next week and discuss the book. And sometimes people would have to do presentations. And as a student organization, they were allowed, of course, to raise funds
Hmm.
and to bring speakers in. So they would bring in speakers like Dr. Ben, Anthony Browder, Asa
Oh, really?
Hilliard, Naeem
Okay.
Akbar,
Yeah.
individuals like that. So you got to see a wave of them come through. But then when I went to and transferred to the University of Houston, they actually had they had an African studies, uh, curriculum in terms of a minor, and then they also had an African American studies, program that they were trying to work
Hey,
to
keep
build up
going.
towards to a
I got to
diploma.
grab the door for my wife. Just keep
No
going.
problem.
All right.
And so, once I got to the University of Houston, that's where more so of the real kind of formal education in Black studies. So it wasn't just, self-guided or, kind of study group issues. You actually had, professors who went and, graduated from university, got their PhDs in these subjects coming to teach the courses. And so that's how I got hit to a lot of things and even met, many of the scholars that I would read about and admire. I had that
Mhm.
opportunity to engage them. And so after matriculating from there, that's when I, a little bit later on moved up to Philadelphia and have been here since.
You got something? I got a question.
Go
So
ahead.
when did your curiosity kick in that it's just like something wrong here? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's more to this than because I was looking at the titles of your books. When did you go into ancient Egypt studies?
Well, that's kind of been there since the beginning. So, my experiences living in the South and in these neighborhoods. Now I gotta kind of put this into context. So, for example, when I went to a middle school in Houston, Texas called Par Revere Middle School, right? And it's on the west side of Houston, and this area is is predominantly white. Now, in sixth grade, we used to have race riots and fights
Really?
in the 80s.
Mm.
That's how racially charged it was. Like I remember walking down and uh, it's the school was several floors, at least two. And you'll be walking through the hallway, and sometimes there's like kind of an open court area where, like, if you're on the second floor, you can see down. You know, There'll be white boys, talking about, go home, nigga. Go back to Africa, da da da. You see, go home, niggas scratching into the on the window, not the windows, the mirrors in the bathrooms and stuff like this, and then just every now and then we just had to get it in.
Right.
And so, again, you're already not getting Black studies at home. They're trying to be neutral and not raise you in, that kind of consciousness. And then, but you're going into these spaces where the children, and of course, which are reflections of the adults, are behaving and reminding you of how different, you are. And so this is what motivates. Well, what about us? What did we do in history? And da 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 da. So now, keep in mind, like, it's that curiosity and this interest in Black people that when I came across the Hebrew Israelites, the first thing that they would do is try to give you color scriptures, what they would call color scriptures. So, these are the Blacks in the Bible. Da, 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 da. So you excited to hear about Black people in the Bible and all this, because I'm still in a Christian mindset. And so it's interesting that, I credit Mrs. Bird. Mrs. Bird in sixth grade taught geography, right? And she's the one that kind of really oriented me towards Africa. But I was dislocated, some years later by the Hebrew Israelites. And of course, when they would talk about the Africans, they would say that we're Black, but we're not Africans. Right. And they're the African booty scratchers, and the Egyptians did this and this and this. So they, for a while, my head was turned from Egypt, but once, again, I was that's a whole different conversation of why I left the Hebrew Israelites. But during that same time where I'm distancing myself away from the group and its teachings, I'm starting to read for myself, these the greatness of African people and heritage and whatnot. And so, with ancient Egypt being the most abundant in terms of literature out there, that was, most folks' kind of entryway, into African people and studies. So, but luckily, not only with the Egypt, because I actually, minored in African American studies. In African studies, I kind of double minored, because when I transferred to the University of Houston, I was an accounting major. And you were at Southwest Texas State, you didn't need a minor. So I didn't take any minor classes while I was at Southwest. But at the University of Houston, they required you to get a minor. And so I was thinking that me taking the African American studies courses was counting towards my degree. And it wasn't. So I took 12 hours of African American studies. And it was like, no, that doesn't count. We wish you would have came to us sooner. You have to take African studies. because when you're dealing with business, you have to look at global business and all this other kind of stuff. So
Right,
you had to
right,
take African studies. So now I got to go back and take these African studies. Overall, it's a win, but that's a lot of money. That especially if
right,
you got
right,
student loans that you got to
right,
pay back over time. So everyone isn't privileged to have had those courses. So it wasn't just Egypt, Egypt, Egypt. It's Egypt, it's Ghana, it's the history of South Africa, it's
right,
slave trade, it's Harlem Renaissance, it's Du Bois, it's
right.
Fannie Lou Hamer. Like it's a well-rounded curriculum, and so this kind of adds to the diversity and why I'm able to, for example, look at ancient Kemet and be able to connect it in very serious and scientific ways with cultures from West Africa, Central Africa, South Africa, as well as the diaspora, including, African Americans here in the United States. So I hope that kind of answers
Oh no,
your
no, that's
question.
good. That's good. So do you remember when you had that wow moment? Because I remember my wow moment when the light
Uh,
bulb just like popped like that. I was like, wow. You know what I mean? Did you ever have that moment where it just like,
I
click?
don't know
And
if
so
it's
it,
it.
so it gradually,
Yeah, for me, it
built
was just grad because I just always been into the study of history.
and it
You
happened.
know, so it's they happen, but it'll be on the most minute thing that you wouldn't think is
That's
important.
a fact.
We know the big picture, but it'd be these little things that is insignificant in any other conversation. But in the context of my research, it's a light bulb that goes off
Right,
on certain things, right?
right.
And so to give you an example of what I mean, part of the tool set that I've acquired throughout the years is the study of African languages and linguistics,
Okay.
right? And so with a deep knowledge of language studies, it's basically a time machine to go back to your most ancient ancestral minds and to
Okay.
see the world through the lens in which they saw it and how they mapped words to ideas, right?
Mhm.
And an aha moment for me was like going through the language and realizing that a lot of the culture and the philosophy and ideas emerged in ancient African times because the words sounded similarly,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
And because words sounded similar to one another, those words that had any kind of resemblance to each other, the ancients believed that there was a natural and divine connection to these terms.
Mm.
And so, because of that belief, of course, they're not historical comparative linguists. They don't know about evolution of words and sounds over time and related. It's a whole bunch of things that we understand about language now, but they didn't. So, if this synthesizing of similar sounding words inspired them to create certain cultural motifs and ideas that had long lasting implications, which you can see even amongst the ancient Egyptians, for example. So, for example, you when you go across Africa, you'll see priests and kings all wearing leopard skin
That's correct.
garments, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
The reason why you would see kings and priests and elders wearing leopard skins is because the word for leopard or large cat or cheetah sounded like the word for king or elder
Okay.
or father.
Okay.
And because those two words sounded the same, they believed that they derived from the same, that they, in essence, they were the same word. So to align themselves in that spirit, they would hunt cheetahs and leopards and take the skin, and that would be the symbol, of their it'll be a royal symbol, it'll be their symbol of kingship. But that same word also sounded like a word for spirit or double. And
Okay.
so when you, for example, you go in ancient Egypt, I'm pretty sure you've heard of concepts like the Ka
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and the Ba.
Yeah.
Well, that word Ba again means leopard,
Mm-hmm.
cheetah, the king, and also the spirit and the spirit double. Right?
Okay.
It's the same in Congo. It's the same in Yoruba land, and in other languages, and in ancient Egyptian, Ba is also the word for ram, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
so when you go out further west, the cognates for that term, are still associated with um, kingship and spirit and divine divinities and the like out there. So it's not anything that is really kind of just like big and jump at you. It'd be
Small.
these little
Yeah.
connections like this that when you step back and look at the larger picture, you're seeing, how all of this stuff connects. And for someone like me who is constantly engaged in these conversations on the Africanness of the ancient Egyptians, this
Mhm.
is just further proof, of the heritage of the ancient Egyptians. Because the same words that the ancient Egyptians are using to represent all these particular concepts, you'll find their cognates in these African groups in West and Central Africa, for example. And so the only way that this can happen is if the ancient Egyptians, the Yoruba, the Akan, the Bakongo, the Baluba, all derive from the same ancestral source, right? So you're able to scientifically and logically make these arguments, and have these conversations based on that data. So it's really kind of seeing, where certain rituals come from, and what were the causes for migrations, over time. What are some ideas that we find, that permeate, because there are large differences between African people, but there
That's
are
true.
some fundamental commonalities. And do those commonalities exist amongst its people still in the diaspora, even though they have been existing for the last 500 years, 400 to 500 years outside of the continent of Africa, right?
So now they've been an argument. I've heard people say this,
Yeah.
that the spirituality in ancient Egypt or Kemet was a religion. I've heard those arguments.
All
What's your
right.
view on spirituality? Was it a religion or was it not a religion?
Well, I try to be as academic as possible in these types of discussions, and I try not to. It's you can't do it 100%,
Okay.
but as best as humanly possible to kind of step out and view things as objectively as I can. And
Okay.
so I understand the politics, I understand the history of our engagement with the concept of religion, whether we're talking about Christianity, Islam, or Judaism. And
Mhm.
so I understand where that feeling is coming from, where people want to distance themselves and not deal and not want to put these labels on the ancient Egyptians or African people in general.
Mhm.
But I personally do not find a problem with the association. Because when you're talking about religion, You're talking about the organization of a people's culture and ideas. So religion is communal. Spirituality is an individual thing. So while ancient Egyptians as individuals, as African people as individuals, you have a spirituality amongst yourself. There's still a level of community organization of these ideas. And so we got to keep in mind that we speak English.
Mhm.
So whatever, in most situations, the Africans did not have a separate word for this, right? Because it's just your way of life, it's just your culture. So whatever the culture is, that's what it is. And so, like, I love the term, uh, and I forgot the phrase, but it's a Bassa term. Bassa is a people out of Cameroon who speak a Bantu language, right?
Mhm.
And in my book, Aluja Volume 2, that was released in 2020,
Mhm.
I was chapter 1. I was doing an analysis of the word Ma'at. So I was looking at Ma'at in ancient Egypt, and then looking in other cultures to see if they had the same term, and to see if they articulated it and practiced it, in a similar manner as what they did in ancient Egypt. And so one group that I found was the Bassa in Cameroon. Now, it's
Okay.
not going to, the word that is cognate is not going to sound the same to your ear as the word Ma'at. But even we're pronouncing the word Ma'at wrong, first of all. But that's another conversation. But
Really?
I think your people will understand Ma'at, so I won't go through that details. So Ma'at, but there's the equivalent in the cognate for Ma'at among the Bassa is Mbak.
Umba. I've heard that.
Mbak,
Mhm.
right? And it's a phrase like when you look at the word for religion in the language, it's like ngai, or ngai, something mbak. It's a connector in between there. So it's slipping my mind. But it translates into, so remember, this is the word for culture and religion, but it's a phrase that you have to say. And it says that which produces imbak. So substitute imbak with ma'at. The religion is that which produces ma'at. So what is ma'at? Of course, truth, justice, reciprocity,
Mm-hmm.
harmony, balance in the society, right?
Mhm.
So is the religion is that which produces truth, justice, harmony, reciprocity, balance,
Mm.
love. And ma'at, when it comes to, because there's a word ma'at in the language, in ancient Egyptian language, that means to give. And ultimately that's the basis of the social system. It derives, the social system derives from the concept of sharing food with someone. So we would say like break bread today, but it's
Right.
it's it's just a communal act of hospitality and sharing food with one another. From that concept of sharing food in exchange with other human beings
Mhm.
comes the whole religion itself. That's the basis. And so it's the sharing of food, the ensuring that the family and the community is healthy at a balanced state, that all other things comes in terms of
Mm-hmm.
harmony, balance in the community. Because when people are hungry, that's that's where crime starts. So
Absolutely.
in any they tell you in the United States that the best predictor of crime in the United States is poverty,
That's a
Mm-hmm.
fact.
right? And so when people go hungry, when there's extreme poverty, where the basic needs cannot be met, there's extreme criminal acts in the society, and to prevent that, you create a social system, a underlying philosophy of sharing and exchanging with one another, so that we make sure that it's not always going to be even, like in a kind of perfect idea. We all have different needs. But at minimum, you should be able to feel like, you know, I can, live and eat and in the society, and everything else is just extra. So this is why when you go into the ancient Egyptian texts, in their declarations, you have declarations of innocence, what I have not done,
Mm-hmm.
and then you declare what you have done. So, and
Right.
when they would declare what they have done, the so-called admonitions to my eyes, I gave food to the hungry, clothes to those who were naked, a boat to those who needed it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're saying that I should for simplicity's sake, I should be able to go to heaven because I did these acts.
Mm-hmm.
I made sure that the people were good, right? And then on top of that, this is what I didn't do. I didn't steal from nobody. I ain't take nobody's wife or husband, right?
Right.
I did not, defraud the temple in terms of sacred space, right? I did not defile the environment. Like these are all the things these are the kinds of acts and character that you would need to have a thriving community,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's what the religion, like people think religion is simply, or that it even has to deal with really the talking with God and rituals. That's not religion. Religion is about good human relations, community. What are those things? So all that other stuff comes from trying to answer the question, how can we keep our community safe? How can we make sure that everyone is fed, clothed, and has shelter? And that there's opportunity for growth. And when there's catastrophe, that everybody has a sense that we belong to one another and that we would help.
So has that changed now? When you view that and you
Uh-huh.
view religions the way they are now, has that concept changed in your mind? Has that when you dealing with like Christianity of today and you dealing with Islam of today, has that changed? Hebrew Israelites, has that same help your brother mentality, make sure everybody's fed in the community? Has that changed now?
I think for the most part, yes, because I think the focus is on the promotion and the proselytization of the religion itself,
Okay.
because these kind of focus on the deification of their culture and, and the so called relationship with God. Now, the Africans have a different, first of all, conceptualization of what God is,
Mhm.
because God is everything and all things at once. It
Correct.
is existence itself.
Mhm.
So you wouldn't understand um, religion to be a tying back to God, because you couldn't leave God if you wanted to. If God is
Right.
an infinite being,
You're
every
right.
and all things exist inside of it. So you are it.
Right.
It's about the people in the community and how you interact with it and the environment itself.
Right.
And then secondly, there is um, there to the degree that they're individual parishioners. I think there's some level that is the attitude. But
Hmm.
keep in mind that when our religious and cultural systems were birthed, there wasn't a whole bunch of people living in a village
That's
in
facts.
comparison today. Like if we go to New York City, Houston, Atlanta, LA, we're talking millions and millions of people in a given territory. That did
Right.
not exist in those times. So it's easier to have that type of consideration in a village setting versus a a metropolis with millions of people. And so when we talk about these religions in this day, it's kind of impossible for them to do that unless the religion is a state religion, right? And that's what governs the entire state. But we know, like in this day and age, why we don't want that,
Right.
in
Right.
so it's this kind of compromise that we have to deal with because of the abuses of religion as a state religion in the past, but the modern needs of a people and the kinds of attitudes, and then of course, because especially in the United States, where you have so many different ethnic groups with so many different histories coming into these spaces, and then on top of that, you have some of these groups who come from religions that are proselytory,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to compete because only one God in their eyes, and it can't be Allah, because it's Yahweh. Well, it can't
Right.
be Yahweh because it's Allah, and there's Jesus. And some don't believe Jesus existed. It's just the Old Testament.
Right.
We believe Jesus existed, but he wasn't the Son of God. He was just a prophet, and da da da, like all this other kind of because they're competing,
Right.
with each other, right? So that adds to the complexity. And well, if you're not one of us,
Yeah,
then we can't, view you in the same light, and we're not going to extend that same attitude that we would have for one of us,
Right.
in this particular tradition. So that's what kind of complicates it.
So did when ancient Egypt was invaded, right? So
Hmm.
you talking Cush and those were pharaohs too.
Hmm.
mhm.
Did the culture change? Did the invaders actually change the culture, or did they add to the culture in regards of their way of doing things, or did the culture change?
Um, that question is a bit more nuanced
Okay.
than normal because we got to understand that outsiders have been coming and settling into ancient Egypt since pre-dynastic times.
Okay.
And there were some contributions. They for the most part appear to be minor, but contributions nonetheless. In terms of vocabulary, in terms of minor deities, um, but the vast bulk of everything in terms of ancient Egypt is homegrown African. And there were times where there were these, we call them intermediate periods, but these disruptions from either internal, like in the first intermediate period, that was more so internal
Okay.
strife, right? Infighting and the like, which may have been caused by a drought, that kind of messed up the economy, which weakened certain areas in terms of political power, and that had an effect on the culture and things there. But the
Right.
second intermediate period, the third intermediate period were definitely invasions coming from the outside, and then after the Kushite period, um, more invasions, and then there's just something else. But the reason why I say that it's nuanced in this way is because unlike how we would assume today when invaders come into a spot
Right.
and they just full scale implement their culture and force everybody to adopt their culture.
Hmm.
Ancient Egypt was so cold that when the invaders came, they adopted Egyptian culture
Yes,
and
sir.
Egyptian
Right.
ideas.
That's true.
So it's that shows you how powerful the this African culture was. It's like And so it's not really until Islam comes, and now you're seeing one of those situations where, we got to get rid of that culture fully and implement our own. So when the Greeks and the Romans came, they were dressed in an Egyptian garb. You see, representations of the Ptolemies, the royal Egyptian hats, and all this other kind of stuff. They worshiping Egyptian deities
Mhm.
and the like. And so that's kind of different than how we would think today. But when you dig deep into it, it's like, well, hell, if it ain't broke,
Right.
don't
Don't
fix
fix
it.
it. Mm-hmm.
You know. So it's only when the Arabs come to this, like, you know what, we need to now. With the except, I take that back. Well, with the Christians, it wasn't forced like in the way that the Arabs did with Islam,
Mhm.
because you still had practicing, indigenous folks there still practicing their ancestral thing. But the Christianity during the Coptic period dominated, the most there. So in terms of that cultural impact, there was, strong because they just adopted Christianity. So even the script changed because they adopted the Greek script at this period. Um, and then but the final nail in the coffin was Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Islam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But like
So
you said that I was going to say, like you said that every person that came to Kemet, they was influenced by the ancient Egyptians. Even the Arabs, they had some of their rituals they got from the ancient Egyptians, like the Salat prayer.
Hmm.
If you look at how they do Salat, you'll see the ancient Egyptians performing that same ritual stance. The
Indeed.
sajda, the dua they make.
And it's interesting now, and I know I'm about to get some hate for this. But I've been dealing with this for a long time, so I'm used to it. But when you are African centered and you ground yourself in ancient Egyptian culture and philosophy,
Mhm.
the opposition to your adoption of African centeredness, they want to call you hoteps,
Yeah, they always
right?
call us that. That's true. That's facts.
And now this isn't going to affect too much. Well, it will in a sense, but my linguistic analysis demonstrates that the very concept of a Muslim was
Mhm.
borrowed from the ancient Egyptians, and that the word Muslim is a dialectical variant of a Hotepi in ancient Egypt. Now, it doesn't sound the same,
Mm-hmm.
but that's why you have to have the linguistic tools to know where these terms come from. So when you do an analysis in the Semitic languages, they can't tell you where Salim comes from, right? And
Mhm.
and this is what becomes Shalom, and it's in the name Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
Like all this Salim, Salam, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam, all that,
Right.
and that's where that word Muslim comes from. Um, all of that is a variation of the very word Hotep. And so
Mm-hmm.
the T becomes Roderick, it becomes liquid. The P interchanges in Egyptian with M and B. Um, but they got it from another form. So the word that they got as Selim in Semitic derives from the dialect various Hotep that's in the form of Seneb. So
Mm-hmm.
if you ever see like
Mm-hmm.
the phrase, Unc Uja Seneb,
Mm-hmm.
it's that Seneb that is where, whatever that dialect is that spoke of Seneb in ancient Egyptian, because there was many dialects, that dialect moved into the Middle East and it became Selim, because the N actually was a liquid, and it's a phenomenon called assimilation. And so the N was assimilated from the following nasal consonant, the M. And so instead of Seren, Selim, it's Seneb, right? And so there's some with the M and there's some with the B, but it's Seneb is where they get the word salam. And so when you're talking about being whole, healthy, and the like, but even in the form in which they got is to settle down. So like the word hotep itself, it comes from a smaller root, tep, that means to put on something. Like if I was to put on a crown, or to make something sit, or to make something settle. Like you'll see it in the dictionaries talking about the setting of the sun, right? And so it is from this physical concept of setting down, right, that you get the concept of like to surrender. So like to pull down your arms. So this is how was really the SLM root, came into. It's like they were surrendering. They're putting down their arms. And from that, again, that same, because Hotep means peace as well.
Yes.
And
That's right.
but it comes from this sitting down, being at rest, being at peace, being relaxed. Right? Like this is where the etymology of it comes. When you go into Semitic, you can't find a smaller word, you can't find a breakdown for it. And this is a good indication that it was borrowed, from it. So I'm not explaining it as well as I could with like if I had some visuals like back here that you can see, or if I had a slideshow. But if a Muslim, tries to use the word hotep in a negative way, you could really argue against it. Like, no, you would be making fun of yourself in this way. But
that's
even
true.
still, like salam, shalom, that's in Hebrew as well. And so, essentially, and hotep was used as a greeting, just like how how people would say, assalamu alaikum or shalom, in terms of greeting, hotep, right? And the h in hotep comes from S, so it's S to H, and so that's a sound change, but I'm going to have to do, and I'm preparing a paper, for this. But once I finish the paper, I'm going to do a layperson's lecture, on my YouTube, so people can see it. Like, oh, okay, wow, that's crazy. Like,
Right.
And so, but where the controversies come in, I don't think the Muslims would be too upset. It was the black Muslims, the other Muslims, yeah. But it's more so the African.
I know. That's true. I was going to ask you. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm good.
Yeah, because you touched on the word ka and ba. If you studied, that's what made me wake up to the Kemetic stuff. One of the things in the what they call the Arabiya alphabet, the word ka is in there and the word ba is in there.
But keep in mind that the ah in ka and ba is not an A sound. It's an R. It's a type of R sound. We don't have it in English because we don't roll our R's, but it's a what we call a trill. So like when you hear people, they always have to, that's the type of R. So it's not. It's more like kar, bar. Like even the word ta, like in ta Mary, it's not ta, it's ter, like in territory. That's where it gets it from. It's an African word, meaning territory. So when you talk about the ka, if you want to know more about the Egyptian ka, study the icon, the okra. The okra, that's what they word for the soul and things of this nature. So you'll see this concept and you'll get a better pronunciation of the term.
I was going to ask you a question about the. Can you go into how people created the deity called Serapis, and it later became Jesus?
Well, I don't know if there is necessarily a connection between Serapis and Jesus per se in terms of the name. That is kind of some old scholarship that really hasn't been substantiated. But Serapis itself is really just a combination of Osiris
And Apis.
and Apis,
Okay.
and which was a bull that was sacrificed, which is a form of Osiris.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was sacrificed for the rising of the Nile River. And so the how should I say? Um, Usually when they would kind of sacrifice like black objects, and this is just Africa in general, it is to bring about rain. Because and the reason why it had to be black is because uh, there's this concept that I call spiritual resonance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is this notion that in order to do something that another object does, I must be on the same frequency as that object. So since rain comes from black clouds,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be dealing with things in blackness because blackness resonates with the cloud. And, so whatever rituals that I do, hopefully it speaks the same language as that object. And, I can thus perform what that object does. So when I wanted to stop raining, I sacrificed a white, cow or sheep or something like that, because when the clouds are white, there's no rain, right? So
Right.
say a situation where it's flooding now, it's too much water. Well, we gotta stop the rain. So that like these are the ideas behind it. So that's why they would sacrifice, a black bull, or in this case, Apis was black with white spots, and in strategic places. But as far as the name Jesus, Yeshua, because Jesus and Jesus is just a Greek way of saying Yeshua,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they would say like Isus, or something like that. So it's like there really is no connection. They just sound like. So this will be a good example of what we mean by when people think the two words sound similar, that they believe that there's a necessary connection, and that's not the case in this case. But that it people just ran with it, and now later historians have to go back and kind of correct that history, uh, for those who don't who don't study language
Right.
and know to ask you know linguistic questions regarding something like that.
So when you start writing race and identity, right?
Uh-huh. Yes.
Like now, where were you going with this? Like, tell us a little bit about that race and identity
Well, it
in the
really
ancient.
started over 20 something years ago when I was coming into, reorienting myself back into Black studies after leaving, or exiting out of the Hebrew Israelite.
Okay.
And when I was entering into college, there was this big debate on the race of the ancient Egyptian, of the ancient Egyptians. And part of it was, so there was that debate unto itself, and then there was this large scale attack on Black studies,
Okay.
right? So in high school, I'm oblivious to all of this, but once you get into this area now, you start to see, right? And it really starts from two individuals. So the first is Shekhan Job
Mm-hmm.
and his works prior, but really what exacerbated it was the release of, I don't know if it was 84 or 86, but Martin Bernal's Black Athena, Volume 1,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
So in the late 90s, when I graduated high school, um, it was this constant attack on Black studies and this notion of Black Egypt. And then this continued conversation based on Black Athena's text. And so that's what, I'm coming in and I'm looking at, just the way that these scholars are debating this topic and what are the arguments and things coming forth. And I noticed that when the Black and African scholars were arguing against um, the Eurocentric scholars, they would always reference Sheikh Anta Diop in his 1977 argument, which was discussed a little bit in 1974 at the famous Cairo Symposium, talking about that the word Kemet, which they believe derived from a word Kim that means black, didn't mean black land as in the soil, but that it meant black people.
Okay.
Right. And so Egyptologists were debating with, African center scholars on this question, and they're just going back and forth. And of course, I know nothing about all of this. So every time I'm reading these arguments or hearing them, I'm like, wow, I kind of lean here, and then they come back with this over here. So it was a good tug of war, and so after a number of years, 2 years to be exact, that's when I just started like, let me look more into this myself, right, and get into the arena. So I started making, so I started asking some questions and getting this from both sides, and just, after a while, I just wasn't satisfied with both sides of the argument. Because I'm like, they're making illogical arguments on both sides. They're bringing up some good points, but this doesn't have nothing to do with this, or this may be minor, or why didn't y'all explore this? And where did you get this from in the first place? It was all kinds of different questions that were coming through my head. So it was in 2002 that, and when you get the book, you'll see that I dedicated to Dr. James L. Conyers, who passed away not too long ago. And this is him here. He's an Africana Studies professor. He was head of the African American Studies program at the University of Houston at the time. And I was sitting in his office one day, and somehow I don't know what the discussion was that led up to this particular point, but we started talking about the race and identity of the ancient Egyptians, and we started talking about the word Kemet. So when I started giving him my ideas on what it could possibly mean, he was like, "I think you have some fresh ideas. What I want you to do, however, is to organize your thoughts into an article, and then I want you to present it. I'm gonna save some time for you. I want you to present it at this African American Studies Symposium that is going to be here in the fall of that same year, and present on this. And so when you get there, it's going to be nothing but PhDs and people working on their PhDs there, but they're going to give feedback, on your thoughts. So I'm gonna frame it that way so they know not to tear you up, too harshly if you just kind of so he essentially kind of lovingly fed me to the wolves. But that's really kind of the defining moment that really kind of starts me in this academic space and learning how to articulate arguments and cite references and go to libraries and all this other kind of stuff. So that's where I met Dr. Malefe Kiti Asante, Milana Karenga, and a host of other, folks, even Dr. Mario Beatty. Mario Beatty is the one who gave me Dr. Theophilo Binga's phone number at that conference. Okay. And this is when Dr. Theophilo Obenga was teaching at San Francisco State University on the West Coast, and so he's the one who Obenga is the one who encouraged me to study, because by this time I switched majors from accounting to computer information systems. So when I told him that I was in computer information systems, he was like, "Oh, you'd be very good in linguistics. You should try linguistics out." Right.
Right.
And so he gave me some words of encouragement and some things to study and the like. And but this was, of course, after the conference. This was sometime, because he wasn't at the conference, but Dr. Mario Baby gave me his number, and I called him probably like a week or so later. But it was that kind of pivotal moment that started this. And so I had a totally from what's in this book to what was when I first typed up in 2002 is totally different. So, but it wasn't until like 2000, because I kept it up. I was having some discussions. There was professors there that gave me feedback, was telling me some resources that I needed to get. Some even scanned some things, for me and mailed it to me. Because again, I'm in Texas, but there was professors out here in Jersey and New York that were down there that would send me stuff as well. So, but it was around 2009 that I just really asked the question, well, who said in the first place? I asked the question, who said in the first place that Kemet means black? Why? Because there's different chems in language. So remember that the ancient Egyptian language did not write out its vowels. So you only have consonants in sequence. And so there are other KM words in the language, but no one had done any study to try to eliminate those other chems as viable candidates for the meaning of the word Kemet itself. So, it forced me, and of course, by this time, I picked up linguistics, pretty well, and just being in science and stuff like this, I know about scientific method and all this, and that's when I was like, let me start from scratch. Let me not assume anything,
Right.
and let me let the evidence fall, and let me let the evidence point me in a way and make the chips fall where they may. Right. And so that's when I came to the conclusion that, you know what? Kemet doesn't have anything to do with blackness at all. So I disagree with the general consensus in Egyptology, and I disagree with Shekinah Job on it referring to black people. And however, by doing this analysis, I've been able to bring about more information that really reaffirms Shekinah Diop in terms of the Africanness of the ancient Egyptians and their relationship to, West and Central African people, because the word Kemet itself is all over Africa.
Okay.
And in some places, it still sounds like Kim, Kam, Kum, right? But in other places, there was a sound change in the first or second consonant. So it just sounds different. So you have Conda, even the word Congo is a cognate for the word Kemet itself, right? So it puts it in the conversation in a different light. And it makes his overall analysis stronger, even though that particular argument, in my opinion, was a weak argument. And so, since the Kemet argument was so central to some of these early debates, I decided in my text to start off with that. But the second volume, so this is volume 1. So the second volume is going to be dealing more on the anthropological side. So now we're going to start getting to the skin color, descriptions, phenotype, DNA studies, cranial studies, eyewitness testimonies, stuff like that. Now that we got this out of the way, right? And that one's going to be an edited volume. So I'll have probably more contributions than everyone else, but there'll be other scholars who will be contributing to that volume. So we can set this conversation on a more scientific and academic plane. So I'm not claiming to be an expert in everything. So there's certain aspects of this conversation. Hey, will you write a chapter for me on this?
Right.
And that's what they'll do, and I'll come in with my expertise and just have it. And then there's going to be a third volume that is just going to be a reference tool that will have all of these citations of like the Greeks and others even later on in history describing the ancient Egyptians. So you have a primary text in that language, my transliterations, and then translations in it, so that you can have just a single reference. So you're not going here to Bernal, you're not going here, da, da, da. It's just in one place. Well, somebody starts arguing. Well, what about when the da, said this? Okay, well, I'm looking at the primary source right here. This is what it
Right.
says, and this is what it means in this language. And we kind of go from there and try to end this argument. But
so what is African Americans are we lost? Have we lost our identity?
yes, but in light of the history, we actually have a good opportunity to develop an identity. And so
That's true. I agree with that.
while the transatlantic slave Holocaust was in fact what it is, a Holocaust, right? And
Correct.
so much has happened to us. The silver lining in it is that we have an opportunity to create from scratch the kind of culture and identity without all the baggage that a more ancestral identity and culture would have. But we wouldn't be necessarily doing it simply from scratch. We have, as they say, hindsight is 2020. We have hindsight now. We got books about our history and our cultures.
Facts.
So we have libraries full of information that we can review and go over and take the kernels of the best of what our ancestors have produced and create a social system and culture from those nuggets and create something stronger than what our ancestors could ever have imagined.
But
right? And this be the foundation for the identity and culture, moving forward. And that's kind of the stuff that I involve myself in. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you think we would have to separate in order for that to happen?
Yes. Not in order for it to happen, but in order for for it to thrive.
Gotcha.
And because, but what we can't do is waste a whole bunch of time trying to convince a lot of assimilationists, right? We just got to start off small, just start off strong, and then we're going to have to take one of those analogies from Elijah Muhammad, with the clean glass and the dirty glass,
right?
And just put the clean glass right next to the dirty glass, right? So that's kind of been my focus. And while this is a very kind of academic text, it is the information that I received as a result of doing this study has sparked an initiative which I call Chicom. And Chicom. So Chicom is just the way that you would say the word Kemet in a few modern Bantu languages, right? Because it's just Kemet just essentially means a farm or farmland, wetland, right? It's a type of land that has been inundated by a river, right? And that's what they use to farm with. So another way that we would say this is a riparian land, right? And so, but Chicom being a movement, an initiative to get African Americans and African people reoriented into agriculture and to develop urban agricultural strategies to address a variety of things in terms of economics, in terms of food sovereignty, living in food deserts. But not only that, but to use agriculture as a model for living.
Correct. I got you.
You know what I'm saying? So it becomes the culture. So you have references, you have agricultural references, just like what the ancient Egyptians did. And so instead of trying to, bring back Osiris and Isis and all this other kind of stuff, again, you take the kernels, because most of that stuff is for children anyway. The adult conversations was much more nuanced and grounded in reality and the like. So that's what we kind of need to do here. So, like, for example, when Ptahhotep in his maxims, he talks about, like how a man should be with his wife, right? He's talking about feed her, clothe her, provide her with oils, to oil her body and things like this to make her happy. And also that, your wife is a fertile field for your Lord, meaning you as the husband, right? In that same text, he uses that same language to refer to friends and friendship. He said, don't be mean to your friends. Be good to your friends, because your friends are a watered field. Now, what is he saying in each one of these conversations? You as a husband, towards your wife, and then, you towards your friends. That, when you're talking about agriculture and farming, you're really talking about investing.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so when you invest in your wife, you invest in your friends in all areas, not just, financially in the way we normally think about investments, but in terms of time, in terms of care and concern, in terms of mental health, encouragement, and the like. When you invest in them, their fruits or whatnot is also shared with you. Just like if you were doing agriculture. When you farm and garden, you're investing in a space. But you just don't just throw things anywhere. It's always with care and concern and with forethought. Right? And understanding seasons, knowing how to be patient, right? To guard your garden against harm. Right. So, we got to erect fences somewhere so certain things doesn't come and eat all the fruits and vegetables that you've been growing, but also how to share and sacrifice. So we reinvest, we take some of that and we reinvest it back into the field. Right. That's the whole point of like first fruit celebrations. So you're not just give, take from the earth.
That's right.
Because all of these are lessons for life. Whatever you receive from your wife and from your friends, you take a portion of that and you reinvest it back into them in some way, right? Like this is the basis of an economy. So like in the Wolof language, the word kam is, they double it, they say kam. And that's the word for economy, right? And economies are built first and foremost based on the relationships between the people of the community. It's not about money, it's about relationships.
It is.
It's about building trust with one another. So that when, first of all, I know you and I know what your skill set is. And when I have a problem, I know who I can trust and go to help solve that problem. Right. And as a result, I extend my arm out to you and I give you the money that you request in order to do that service. And in return, you give me a quality product or a quality service. Right? That's what an economy is. It's the exchange of a community that trusts one another.
Hmm.
That's it.
right? So like there's so much you can learn from agriculture. And so like these are the kinds of things uh, that I would love to see implemented in the community without all the kind of religious, because that's
I
where the
agree.
religion again is community. So you people don't know what a god is and a goddess is, and all we don't speak the languages like they did back in the day.
True.
So we when we even say these terms, we can only say it and see it through the lens of Europeans whose language we speak.
Right. And it's
You
used
know.
as a manipulate. It's used a little bit like it's a manipulation. And we were saying, that's what Daniel and I was saying. We got to get this land.
Hmm.
We're trying to get 300 to 500 acres. We trying to get that land
Get it.
because that's very important.
It
That's
it it
very
is, and that's the conversations that I want to have, and hopefully we can find a good time that is conducive to each one of us
important.
to have you come on my show to talk about that
Absolutely.
initiative and
Absolutely.
and you know what y'all intend to do, at least what you can say publicly,
Hmm.
and what have y'all learned thus far, in
Correct.
terms of this journey. What are
It's a
some of
lot.
the legal things
Yeah.
and taxes or something like that,
Yeah.
that we may not be aware of, but we
Hmm.
have these big ideas, but we need these these little questions answered and the like. So, these are the kind of conversations that emerge as a result of trying to answer, you know, uh, the meaning of Kemet and dealing with the race and identity. Because it's not about the blackness of the ancient Egyptians when it boils down to it. We're inspired by their minds,
Hmm.
their thought
Hmm.
processes, their sense of community. Like think about it like this: in ancient Egypt, there was no money.
That's
So
facts.
Right.
how was a pharaoh without force able to convince people to do large scale projects like building of the pyramids and the temples and agriculture to feed the entire economy without money?
Right.
Makes sense.
So, like that's what I'm looking for. What is that underlying? What's there? What is this Ma'at thing? What does that have to do with it? Let's get deeper into that.
Right. We need
You
to get
know.
deeper into
I
that.
agree.
We really do.
I have a
But
So
because
question. I have a
go
go ahead.
ahead. And I'm sorry, but I got
yes, sir.
about
Yes, sir.
about 10 minutes because I'm
Okay.
in a library
Okay.
and it's about to close. So
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay.
I'm
The
sorry.
the question I have to ask: our ancestors at one time, through my research, were agricultural people. Through
Hmm.
your analysis, would you think would you think caused us to get away from our ancestors' way of agriculture? Through your analysis, because what
I
I
mean, it's a
understand,
simple answer, and that is colonialism. And so,
Exactly.
African people had a certain way of doing agriculture. Remember, it's our way of doing agriculture that drove the slave trade.
Hmm.
They didn't pick up just monkeys from the jungle.
that's
No.
facts.
You wouldn't get
Hmm.
monkeys from the jungle to build your railways and to build your
No.
houses and to watch over your
Right.
children and
That's
to
right.
pick cotton and garden. Like, no, you got artisans, you got farmers and the like. And but once you got here, you had to do it in their way.
Hmm.
And they're coming to realize now that the traditional ways were more conducive to the saving of the soils
Hmm.
and the health of the crops. And so because farming for them is more of a large scale business than essentially a necessity for having food for the community,
Hmm.
right? So and then of course, because farming in our minds is associated with slavery. A lot of us shy away from it because they're not wearing business suits in the process,
Right.
and you can't dress up clean and look pretty
Right. Mhm.
on TikTok or whatnot, because you got to get your hands in the soil. You wearing them
Mhm.
overalls that you see your great
Right.
grandfather wearing and
Right.
all this
That's
other kind
right.
of stuff, right?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
there's been this misperception that there's people who do that kind of work is ignorant in the light, and this is what we want to change that narrative. Like, no, these
No.
I'm trying to get it to the point where if you were in a room full of astrophysicists, mathematicians,
Yeah.
engineers, and there's a
Absolutely.
farmer, all the sisters are looking at the farmer,
Mhm.
as the one of prestige.
Correct. I agree with you.
You
We have to
know,
get back to that.
Because you're
we
right. Because you
gotta
can't eat.
But we're not gonna hold
You
you up,
can't eat
brother.
without no farm. You can't
We go.
feed or
can't
clothe
do
yourself without no
nothing.
farm.
You gotta tell the people where they can get your book.
Well, yes, you can get my book at asarimhotep.com, asarimhotep.com. That is asarimhotep.com.
Yeah, I love the site. But we got to get
Dig
on
it.
your show. We got to get you back. And we got to
Indeed.
talk. We have to talk about this. Get the land,
Indeed.
and what needs to happen. And we'll tell you what we've been running into in regards to that,
Mm.
and what our experiences are. And
Please do.
okay, and
Can I
then
ask
we
you
gonna get.
another question, if you don't mind?
No, go ahead.
I want to ask you about. I want you to get in and talk about the great migrations that happened in Africa. How a lot of African tribes migrated from East Africa to West Africa to South Africa and
Yeah,
to the Americas.
that's a lecture in itself. But what I will say is that it's always migrations. People are still migrating to this day.
That's a fact.
And so don't think that because you see people there now that they've always been there,
That's
Mm-hmm.
facts. That's
And so
facts.
remember that uh, the evidence shows that all Homo sapiens that are living today, their ancestors came from Africa.
Mm.
And that means that these African people walked around the globe and settled in various places over time to help
That's a
populate
fact.
the earth.
Oh, I
And
can't hear you.
so while they were walking, African people just didn't stop and just they just been in that one place while everybody else in the world is roaming and migrating. In Africa, the ones who didn't leave, they were going back and forth and moving for various different reasons. It could have been an issue of wars, could have been an issue of droughts, could have been an issue of diseases,
Mm-hmm.
climate change.
Mm-hmm.
There's very many reasons. Economic opportunities, because you have groups that are always scouting, looking to do trade, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so they develop a map of territories, and over the years you have these big trading routes, like in the Sahara, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an ongoing thing. It's still going. Now we have the technologies where we can fly, get on big ships and move, and
Right.
cars
Right.
and highways. But so that has accelerated the migrations in many respects. But African people have never just been in one space, twiddling their thumbs,
And
waiting for
it's
European
obvious.
people
It's obvious. You go to every
to
place
Reason
come
across the
save
reason
them.
globe.
reason why
We
I
there.
had asked you the reason why I had asked you that question, because it's like a big debate. You got people who like Stan Calloway saying we was already over here, and you got some people say we never was over here. You heard the argument.
Yeah,
Yeah, I ain't got to tell
Yeah.
you.
Well, we got a lot to
And
talk about, but the
we
brother,
do,
he got.
and I
We
love to
just
come
getting
back.
started, bro. You got to
Yes.
come back. You got to come back, brother.
we
One
want
of
we want you
these.
to come back and do the slides still next time if you can.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
we'll
yeah.
do.
And
Indeed,
let us know,
indeed.
man, when you want us to come on. But we
Yeah, I
we
will.
like to have our guests to put it out there. You know what I mean? And
Indeed.
that's how we move. So when we come on your show, we'll put it out there. We let you know what we on.
All right, no doubt, no doubt.
Hey man, we proud of you, man.
I gotta ask you one more question. You have a
Proud of-
cash
Listen,
app?
you gotta
Oh,
go,
my
Daniel.
fault. My fault.
But go ahead and tell them what your cash app is.
That's what I
You know?
wanted to do. Tell the public what your cash app is. That's all. That's all I wanted.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it's just $ Asar Imhotep.
Tell them one more time, brother.
$ Asar Imhotep.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
And we'll put it in the chat.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate
we'll
it.
put your website in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey,
Yes,
we're
sir.
proud of you, man, and you doing your thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Show this brother
Yes, sir.
love. Show
Yes,
him
sir.
your love to the
Show
cash
some
app.
love. Get some money. Y'all been giving y'all money to the pastor and buying his gators and shit.
Reverend Wrong Path. You've been giving your money to Reverend Wrong Path.
Indeed.
And
I
Imam
love
Abu
Reverend
Wrong.
I did like Reverend Ike. I did like Reverend Ike.
Yeah, I did too, because he was honest though. He was straight up honest. Told you what it was.
Hey, we will be talking, my brother. And just call us, man, and then let us know so we can come on.
No doubt.
And we got to get you back next month.
Indeed.
It's been a pleasure, my brother, and an honor.
The pleasure and honor is all mine. Y'all be blessed.
All right, peace, my brother.
Peace.
Hotep.
Yeah, man, that was a good one.
Yeah, it was.
That was good. He's very knowledgeable, man.
Yes, he is. I believe I kind of felt that too. When people used to just tell the surface stuff about what Kemet mean, that it means black. I knew it had to mean more than just what he just said. I always felt that.
It's always been a thing where the white culture came in and basically said, like, listen, the Italians and all them, man, they didn't consider themselves white.
What'd you say? I can't hear you.
Hold on. The Italians and all them, they didn't consider themselves white.
No, they didn't. The Irish wasn't considered white either at one time.
Absolutely. They was at war with each other. They was killing each other.
Yeah. And that always made sense to me. We didn't have no concept of calling ourselves different. We refer to ourselves by family origin, tribe. We ain't just go by skin color. That makes a lot of sense.
That was a white supremacy thing.
Yes, it was.
We started growing. And so they said, well, we're going to get everybody who's close to our color, and we're going to put everybody up under this.
And make them white. Put them under the title white.
And when the stuff hits the fan, they bail out in a minute. They be like, oh, no. And that's the truth. They really are. Oh, no, we Italian, brother. No.
I seen that too. You're right.
We ain't messing with them over there like that, brother. They'll throw them under the bus in a minute.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
Because the truth is, they really don't like them that much.
No, they don't. They don't.
The Italians and them, they don't really like the Europeans like that.
Yeah, especially the ones from Sicily. They have man.
They don't. That's a fact, bro.
Yeah.
But cool, man. It's been real, man. But I got some stuff.
Yes, sir. I was happy to have that brother on the show, though, because I know he's scholastic. He knows what he's talking about.
Off the chains. Young brother, too. Yeah, putting in that work. It's putting in that work.
Yes, sir. Well, next time we have to bring him on the show, he could do the slides. I love slides.
Yeah, the slides very entertaining. The slides are very entertaining, man. So what we got to do, man, is we got to keep it moving.
Yes, sir.
But good, brother. So we're gonna chop it up when we get off the show. But thanks for watching. Cheers, everybody. And Hotep, peace.
Yes, sir. Peace and love and unity.
Unity, brother. Unity.